Plus, you can edit out the first couple of
Oh, yeah,
bits.
yeah.
You can do that. It's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I'm here.
Okay. Hi there, everyone. It's Tony Paladin, co-founder of Paladin Brookes Global Sports and Entertainment. And today is another episode of our podcast, Smarter Sport and Entertainment. So, introducing my lovely partner, Hannah. Hello, Hannah. How are you?
Hi. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
And today we're going to be speaking about something that I think both of us have been wanting to speak about all year, and that is the topic of women in sport and therefore women in business, and whether we are in a state of progress or still stuck in a state of performance theatre. So basically what we're going to be positioning around today, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Hannah's thoughts on this, and I might just offer my own 2 cents, is that does women's sport only suffer from underinvestment, or does it suffer from lazy imitation by brands, by rights holders, and by governing bodies? It's a very juicy topic.
It is very juicy, and that's the thing. I think I don't think a 20-minute podcast is ever going to cover this, so we'll probably end up having to do it again.
And again, and again.
And again, and again. And to be honest, I'm quite happy to do that until it gets sorted. Because, yeah. Where do we begin? There's several angles here, right? There's several angles. Now you've got what I think is a separate discussion to today, but you've got the grassroots inclusion element, which is one thing, which is an entire beast. And maybe we touch upon that for females again another time. You've got elite athlete involvement, and then you've got national governing body support and delivery, and then you've also got brand support and infrastructure around participation. And I think, personally, I don't think the athletes are doing anything wrong. They're showing up. They're dedicated. They're putting themselves through the paces. You're seeing them win on the field. But what's happening off the field then? Because it's not quite showing what I think a lot of the younger generations think that should be like, it should be represented. So
I've got a single statement to make.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fairly blunt about it. I feel in the ecosystem of female participation and integration in sport, I feel that a lot of brands specifically are suffering from FOMO and keeping up with the Joneses and are prematurely rushing the process, which ends up with a lot of poorly managed relationships and collateral damage. Was that blunt enough?
Yeah.
So in saying so, is what I mean is a lot of brands and organizations have acknowledged the fact that women need to be seen in sport more so. And I think, quite frankly, are taking cheap shots at campaigning and marketing around it just to be seen to drive sales. And I think the bottom line is more like, ooh, okay, everyone else is doing it, so let us do it. And this is why I say I don't think it's actually been doing properly at the scale that it should be. So I think where the investment into the integration of bringing in female participation isn't so much of actually developing the female ecosystem in sport. It's more about how do we showcase it and capitalize it, and basically, for lack of a better phrase, putting lipstick on a pig. There's no authenticity behind it. Sorry,
Yeah. No, I know, and that's the thing. I think brands who do that though are just as bad as who aren't doing anything, because like what we need, okay, I think what we actually need is a brand to see, just to say like, no, we believe this aligns with our values and we're going to stick with this and we're going to support this for a minimum of 5 years. Like, that's what we need. We need brands that see the vision, see how so many brands have values that are embedded into culture, about inclusion and accessibility, and they do things to tick a box so that when they have their board meeting, they can say they've done X, Y, and Z, supported X, Y, and Z, and everyone claps. But what is the actual impact having? Because I don't think anyone actually cares about that. Truly, I don't think anyone cares, like in their internal infrastructure. The people who do care are the people who lose the support after a year, and they're then back at square one with no sponsorship funding. They can't go on tour, they miss opportunities, and then they miss the boat for them and their career in sport.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point to raise. Is that, I mean, an athlete's lifespan in general, depending on your sport, does carry limitations. Obviously, certain sports one can extend the age at which they retire, at least in professional sport, a lot longer than others. But in certain sports that are more highly taxing on the body, I mean, the life cycle is fairly short. So I do think that there's a big rush to sort of get things done. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. Is often I think people within an organization or within that ecosystem are really, I mean, their salary or their job are basically driven by KPIs. So if they do not deliver X amount of, excuse the phrase, showing upness, then they don't meet the KPI, and therefore, their job becomes under review. So often there's a lot of, I'd say, false. I'm not going to call it false marketing. I'm going to call it lying. I think there's a lot of lying that brands do in terms of what they're doing to service female participation in terms of what's actually happening. And I think where the massive blind spot lies and is maybe only starting to be acknowledged now is actually the deeper market research into sport. And this is not so much, I mean, this gets to the level of if you look at a brand and what a brand's basically manufacturing or selling is, does my product or does the product that I'm creating, does it service a female as well as a male, or is it a male product that's been retrofitted to service a female at around 90%? And I think, and I've had a number of very deep conversations with people specifically in the sports equipment and apparel industries where the latter is the case. It's often been male founded. And look, I'm a guy, so I can speak quite honestly about this. It's been male founded. It's been built around a male ecosystem. And because the brand has basically got FOMO in terms of not being seen to be actively pushing their product in the female market, they literally retrofit. And I mean, I can give a million physiological examples, which I'm not going to, but I have noted that trend. And I think there are specific brands out there, and I think this is really where 2026 and beyond there's going to be a massive boom, are brands that honestly take their product seriously with regards to the ecosystem and actually servicing women properly, are going to be the ones who are going to integrate into sports a lot more authentically. And those are going to be the ones that are going to drive inevitably performance and growth of those particular sports.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, the product side of things is interesting because that's another conversation again, isn't it? I think just going back to the brand versus athlete versus like sports property. Now I know, like let's just take out rugby, football, for example, because there's been a lot of success there. I'm seeing a lot of sports properties, big teams that sell female sponsorship packages to brands, but they discount them.
Really?
Oh yeah, you would have seen this, but the fact that they're doing that completely demeans it. Like they're trying to make it accessible for a brand, but what you're actually saying is we do not think these things are equal value, is what you're saying. So
Yeah.
you're part of the problem. You're culpable for the lack of progression, maybe, that we're not seeing in women's sport. And it really frustrates me. Now, in the past, I, as a brand, have sponsored a female athlete. And that process taught me a lot about that relationship between a brand and a sports property and how little care for the reasoning why I was doing that. The only thing that for them was it was a price point entry. They could get me in quickly as a brand to support something. And that for me never felt truly aligned. But it was a great learning experience for me because it meant something to me, but they didn't know that. They didn't care about that. If they had, I might have sponsored for year 2 and year 3. But that money was never used, I doubt, for that actual athlete. So I think brands and rights holders and sports properties need to do a better job of communicating that impact directly. Like, you're discounting things, that's not great. But you also need to show that that money is being protected and put forward to that.
Well, I think that's a disservice to both parties to be doing that. I think and potentially where the biggest loss is going to come is potential future development. I mean, when we are working in trying to pioneer a pathway, I mean, this is where we're working towards the integration of women into sport in a more natural and authentic way. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of storytelling, infrastructure building, all of that. And I think if it's discounted, it's just a cheap shot. It's okay, cool, let's quickly come in, let's sponsor it, let's look cool, let's tick the box, let's meet the KPI, but we haven't thought about year 3, 4, and potentially an extension, of that contract or that partnership. So the whole thing becomes like self-perpetuating in actually killing the concept. It just you'll end up sponsor flipping if you're going to keep discounting.
Exactly. And that's the thing. You're not solving any issues by devaluing something. You're actually becoming part of that problem, and you're slowing progress. And I mean, I'd love a study to be done on the athletes that are being sold as this undervalued property. And I would love to know how that affects their psychology. I would love someone out there who's in this field to do that, because I think the impact should be studied. And I think, because I don't think I'd be very happy about that personally. I'd be like, well, I'm sorry, we've won just as many titles as the guys. In fact, we've won more titles than the guys. Why are we being devalued? I'm worth more than them. And I think, people talk about equality all the time, but equality isn't just, I don't know, treating people the same. It's actually saying both of these things are just as important as each other. And at the minute, it's not looking like those sports properties are doing that.
No, I mean, obviously the psychological impact is going to be huge. I mean, if year on year, if you're not being recognized on the global stage in your competitive environment, like, how does that make you feel? Does it even make you feel like you're taking your sport seriously? Should you not be doing something else? Maybe, and this is where it goes into like maybe working away from women in sports into women in business who've got similar challenges. I think if I look at it objectively, I think women in business are probably a little bit further down the line in terms of basically creating the pathway as opposed to women in sport. I think women in business have credibly done a lot in business. And I think in sport, this is where a very interesting question also comes in is, I mean, it'll obviously depend on the sport, but in certain sports where you do have women who can compete at an equal footing as a man, do you have a mixed event or do you have one event?
Yeah.
Because this is a very hotly debated topic, and I think I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that. So, I mean, if we exclude your obvious sports, like let's say rugby, that's just genetically going to potentially is going to be male dominated. If you choose a sport like let's say
Golf.
Formula One or golf, that's sports that require reaction time, accuracy, acuity, sports where both males and females have got equal traits. Should there be more of a push to integrate those events or keep them as separate categories? I know I'm opening a big can of worms with this, but it's a valid question.
I was about to say, this is another podcast. But I mean, look, Formula One, women and men can race in the same competition. It just hasn't happened because there's not enough coming through as a feeder, which is why the F1 Academy was created. You know, it's a feeder series to help them get to the point where they can compete in Formula One. I don't think that's going to happen for another maybe 5 years because there's just not enough of them coming through the system. And then when you unpick that further, you get to a point, it's like, well, the successful racers are only there because they've had continuous funding for years to pay for them to be in the right series. So then you're thinking, well, okay, then that's an obvious decision from a brand who they're supporting, a male or a female. So yeah,
I mean,
again, it comes down to a brand involvement. So
well, this is where the E1 series made some solid headway. I mean, if you look at Anna Glennon, you know, world champion.
yeah, exactly. And that just goes to show it's a proven format and it works. It works. Don't get me wrong, I don't think every sport will be the same. It physically, I don't think it could be. But the sports that can be like that need to do a better job, certainly at national governing body level, at making sure it does happen. And I think Formula One at the minute and the FIA need to do a little bit more. Like F1 Academy is a great start, but it's still not quite done enough. Now, I think... So let me just tell you a very quick story because I think it's relevant. And then maybe this will all kind of... You'll see why I say this. A friend of mine has a 12-year-old daughter who is very good at football. Very good at football. Will probably end up playing for the Lionesses at some point. Is dead set on getting to that point. We had the BBC Sports Personality of the Year awards, and my friend said to me her daughter was a bit shocked that Rory McIlroy won and the Lionesses missed out. She couldn't quite fathom why, despite all of their success, why they were not being considered as better than him. And I love that because, quite frankly, she's right. She is right. And my friend had to try and explain that maybe it's the people who were voting that are more inclined to align with a male, a white male, over a group of females. Now that then opens up a whole can of worms of, okay, maybe the audience, the fans, are part of the problem. Okay, because why is Formula One for women not being successful? Well, maybe it's because the dinosaurs that the brands are catering to. Why are you catering to dinosaurs when they're just going to end up being fossil fuel? You need to be looking into the future and you need to be thinking about these 12-year-old girls who are coming through the system with passion, with their heads screwed on, thinking about how to solve problems better, not the people who, quite frankly, are archaic and have no idea.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah.
Which begs the question then, especially with the youngsters, and if you're looking at your preteens, and as they're moving into maybe a more specialized, if they're specializing in sport, does keeping separation build confidence, or does it hard code inequality in the longer term? It's a good question to ask because at the end of the day, when children are at a more developmental age, so before hormones have kicked in, should you mix formats to expose girls and boys together to compete against one another when they're more, say, physically, I suppose, adaptable, or there's more neuroplasticity before biologically they start to diverge, or do you keep it separate? I mean, this is a whole other podcast that you can into the schooling system and into the junior sports ecosystem.
Yeah.
Again, these are difficult questions. I don't mind opening cans of worms.
No, I don't. I think we need to.
I have opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think everyone needs to get better at this. Like, I think everyone needs to try a bit harder. I think fans and audiences need to be more open. Like, don't get me wrong, people want to watch women's sport. Like, it's great that the media are actually showing up and putting things on TV, and I get to sit down and watch England rugby win the World Cup. That's fantastic. I love that. A lot of people want to watch that. But the problem comes when you introduce a poor infrastructure, a lack of competing equality, a lack of brands who think, oh, do you know what? The buzzword today is women in sport hashtag. So great, we'll put 100K on our nearest team that we think will solve a problem. But as soon, do you know what? As soon as that little hashtag drops off of, your top 10, they go, sorry guys, we're out. Bye. It's not okay. And I think everyone just needs to do a little bit better. And that's why we're having these conversations. I think I'd like to think a lot of the contacts we have will see this and hear this and say, do you know what? You've made me think about this, and I'm actually going to have a long, hard look at our marketing and think, how can we do this sustainably? Because I think that's the key here. It needs to be sustainable. That's how we change things.
The sustainability part is absolutely key, but it's the tricky one to get around because that is not, it's not the seen KPI at the end of the day. Sustainability is actually building the infrastructure and the performance. And that's the unsexy part of it. Yeah. So, the sexy part of it is like the kit, the glamour, the fireworks, the glitz, the glam, all of that type of stuff. But the actual being able to support an athlete during a developmental phase of their life where they need to be supplementing themselves with an income is like, that's where the true nuts and bolts are. That's going to also allow an athlete to stay longer in their career, to evolve. And I think like this is probably one of the biggest takeaways, I think, if there are any specifically female CFOs out there, and male state matter as well, is if you're looking to invest in women's sport, is are you prepared to invest sustainably in the non-sexy part of actually building the infrastructure long term?
Because it actually aligns with your values. Don't say your values are that and then don't do it. Like, no. Don't bother. Change your values then.
Yeah.
Change your values.
What this really does is then it just dissuades brand flipping. So if you can build authenticity, you end up with a longer term partnership. And we've spoken about this time and time again and we've killed the word sponsorship, and we talk about partnerships working into relationships. As a brand and a sports property, so it's either an athlete or a team, become closely integrated over time, the more success and the more they're going to have and the more synonymous they're going to become with one another. So this is where the sustainability part comes in. So it's completely anti-brand flipping. So especially, and I actually feel quite strongly about this, if there's going to be a form of sustainability in female sport, I think brands need to choose very carefully and invest quite, I don't want to say deeply as in overspending, but I'm saying like invest in the infrastructure with the long-term vision in mind.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you have to do that, it has to align with your values. Because if it doesn't align with your values, then don't bother. Rather sponsor men's sport. Sorry, just being honest.
Blunt. I think that should be your catchphrase. Sorry, blunt. Excuse me, I'm being blunt. It's true though. I think you're right.
But I also think these are uncomfortable truths that need to be spoken about. I think, it's all good and well to dance around and keep everyone happy. But I mean, the reality is being at the coalface and trying to mediate relationships between sports properties and brands is you have to have uncomfortable conversations and be willing to do so. But, not deviating off there are certain core principles and core truths. And rather, to be honest, rather have the difficult conversation up front. Let's, talk about the elephant in the room, and either is it going to continue to be there or not? If it is, then part ways. If not, work through it, then create something sustainable.
Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've massively overrun here, and I think we could definitely carry on. But I would like to end this by just saying, and this is a bit of a shout out and a call out to the brands. Do you think, as someone who works in a brand in marketing, or I don't know, what other departments would work in this? CSR, You know, all these little fancy labels people call women's sponsorship, which is CSR because it's corporate social responsibility. Do you think by just jumping in and sponsoring a year and then leaving again and ticking a box, you're going to actually build trust in your brand?
Ouch. That's a good question. I'd love to hear the comments though.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's a loaded question. Anyway, well, what I would like to do is, I think we should round this one up, but I'd like to have another chat because I think we can do a very specific deep dive into CSR and grassroots.
Yeah.
It's another huge passion point of mine, especially with regards to developing young athletes and basically how brands address that. Are we doing it through marketing, or are we doing it through CSR, or are we allowing our CSR to actually be our marketing for us, because that's done more authentically? And yeah, I've got quite a few case studies I'd like to raise. But anyway, until next time, Hannah, thank you very much. I really appreciated that. And I really do hope you get some interesting feedback.
Me too. I look forward to it. Drop my email down here. We'll put it in the description. Send me your feedback. It'd be great.
Don't hate us at paladinbrooks.com.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll chat to you soon. Take care. And yeah, looking forward to our next one.
Bye. Thank you.
Cheers. I'm dropping my hand now.
I thought I'd just stay still.